Paris, who's an economist with the Communication Workers of America. He's also been an economist for the Northern Cheyenne Tribe, the Montana House Committee on Economic Development, the Montana Alliance for Progressive Policy. He's taught at many universities, including the University of Montana and City University of New York. He's PhD of Economics, is from the graduate faculty of the New School for Social Research in New York City. Truly somebody who's among the nation's top experts on economic impact of trade issues.
All right, outside in front there was this little thing called the Constitution, right? And at the preamble it says, we the people of the United States promote the general welfare, right? It's supposed to promote the general welfare. But our trade policy models do not promote the general welfare. Might help with exports, might not. Who benefits, who doesn't? Just two trade policies. NAFTA and allowing China into the World Trade Organization meant for Colorado the loss of 70,500 jobs. In this district, the loss of 16,200 jobs. Our trade policies have hit workers very hard. In Colorado, workers, majority workers, have lost $1.9 billion in wages annually. In this district, that's $293 million lost wages. State and local revenues are attached to that too. So Colorado and local governments lost $165 million. Revenue from this district, $25.5 million. The trade deficit for Colorado from 2011-2014 increased almost $1.5 billion, 33%. Now you'll hear a lot about the importance of exports. Exports are great, they add jobs. But what you won't hear is the avalanche of imports that destroys jobs. Millions and millions of jobs. Our national trade deficit is $500 billion. That's money that goes out of this country to other countries, like those in Australia, which has a good trade balance with us, and especially to other countries. That, if we didn't have that trade deficit, we'd have 6 million additional jobs. That helps small businesses, it would help everyone, promote the general welfare. So TPP will have a similar effect. Studies sponsored by the auto and textile industries project 600,000 job losses due to the TPP. Just two sectors. Vietnam, we'll be competing with, has a minimum wage that averages less than 60 cents an hour. That's who we'll be competing with. One study projects that the TPP will result in wage cuts for 90% of American workers. Who's it benefit? Well, the major beneficiaries are multinational corporations, who the TPP gives expanded rights and protections when they offshore to other countries, reduces their risk, and they get duty-free access to the U.S. market without having to deal with our labor standards or our environmental standards. What a deal! What are they going to do? Just like with NAFTA, just like with CAFTA, just like with TPP. And foreign corporations operating in the U.S. also get expanded rights and protections. And they can actually sue the U.S. for changes in public interest legislation, take them to arbitration panels in the World Bank and UN, where these challenges will be heard, totally outside our judicial system. And these arbitrators can order the payment of hundreds of millions, tens of millions, billions of dollars in compensation for the loss of expected future profits. So the costs of these trade policies in terms of jobs, wages, our standards, our democracy, overwhelm the benefits of increased exports. And increased exports are great. We support that. But it's a whole package deal, right? So there is a better way. There's an alternative. We can have trade policies for our globalized system, which is a fact, that have balanced trade as opposed to massive trade deficits, that strengthen and effectively enforce environmental, labor, consumer standards instead of undermining them. that protect national sovereignty instead of giving multinational corporations, who are the ones who write the rules. We are the rules, and it's not the countries necessarily, it's the corporations. Giving super rights to them, no. We want affordable access to essential medicines, not giving extended patents to the pharmaceutical companies, human rights, safety net. We want to protect congressional authority over trade, which is in Article 1 of the Constitution, that Congress has the right to regulate trade with other nations. And we want congressional approval of set negotiating objectives and have them approve of trade pacts before they are signed with the dotted line. So it's time for an alternative trade policy that will benefit everyone, not just a few. But for this to happen, it's up to you and for members of Congress who have the vote. Corporate personhood.
Yeah.
This is corporate nationhood.
Yeah.
This moves the corporation to the status of a sovereign nation.
Yep.
So that under ISDS provisions, states, unions, environmental groups, none of them initiate proceedings for arbitration. It's only the private investor, primarily multinational corporations. So, what do? There are all sorts of weird terms, fair and equitable treatment, things like that, that have been interpreted by arbitration panels in very strange ways. They don't have to deal by precedents. There was a case in Central America where the U.S. government and the Central American government said, don't do this, don't do that. The arbitration panel said, I don't care what you say. We're doing what we're doing. They don't have conflict of interest rules. The same group are private sector attorneys that both are in the arbitration proceeding, and another point can be arbitrators. So what are the examples of these kind of things that have been brought? Cases against environmental. Vattenfall is a Swedish company that is bringing suit against Germany for billions of dollars because Germany is transitioning from nuclear to alternative.
Yeah.
There is the fracking. That was a question there. Provinces aren't the ones who will be liable for the damages. It's the nation, the government, federal government, depending on the form of government. So Lone Pine is suing Canada, basically, for Ontario province's moratorium on fracking while they conduct an environmental assessment. Eli Lilly is suing Canada for its patent rules that say you can't have a drug unless it's proved to be effective. You can't just change a little thing and expect to get a new patent to make profits. They're being sued for that. Australia, one of the most famous cases around. If you know John Oliver, Google him and do tobacco and ISDS. In 2011, and the ambassador can speak much more knowledgeably about this than me, but in 2011 the Parliament passed, it was signed, plain packaging. Philip Morris and tobacco companies took them to court within Australia. The High Court ruled in favor of the government. Philip Morris has set up a subsidiary in Hong Kong that is taking Australia to an ISDS panel suing for, in quotes, billions of Australian dollars for effectively expropriating property or decreasing the fair value of their expected future profits. This is crazy. This is an attack on our sovereignty. So, it's kind of backwards. The TPP is almost all negotiated, more or less. You know, the big questions still remaining. How does Congress establish objectives for the TPP? But it's almost negotiated. Right? You know, common sense. So, whatever it is, this is what we'd like to see with trade authority. We'd like to see a real congressional role in selecting appropriate trade partners, to have criteria. because they're going to get access to the U.S. market, the biggest, most prosperous market in the world. There's a real big carrot here. What do you think these trade negotiations are about? So, what about human rights? Whatever. We want our popularly elected representatives to have a say in that. Because, after all, Congress is supposed to set trade policy, right? More or less. We want mandatory negotiating objectives to ensure that trade agreements deliver broad benefits. Fast track, were not mandatory. Congress could say whatever objectives there were, they did not have to be followed in the actual trade agreements. We want enhanced transparency to ensure meaningful congressional and public input. And I can get to the process in a minute. We want congressional certification that trade goals have been met before the trade pact is signed. Right? Now it's backwards. It's signed, then it goes to Congress. Right? We want a congressional approval of trade agreements and then authorization of executives to sign it. So a mechanism for sizable minority in the House to obtain a vote on a resolution to remove an agreement from expedited consideration if it is not in the interest to promote the general welfare. And we want trade negotiating authority to be considered in conjunction with related trade and economic policy. It's all one big thing, right? So that would be trade promotion that recognizes the rights of Congress, the constitutional authority of Congress to set the policy, but allows the executive to do the actual negotiations, which is the way it usually takes place, or should take place. In terms of transparency, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Europe, when they negotiate, they release text. We did with the, I think it was the Free Trade of the Americas. I might not be quite correct on what particular trade pact it was, but that was on the web for people to see. It didn't pass. Maybe that's why it's not on the web now. It's a real problem that we have a democracy and constitutional checks and balances, and the balances have been eroded. I was referring to the Australian trade balance of Colorado, which is not, not in favor of the U.S. It's a $375 million deficit in Australia's favor.
The ambassador is going to meet with some of our local companies tomorrow. We're going to try to reverse that, Kenneth.
It won't play well back in Sydney. So, jobs. All right. NAFTA, China into the WTO, and Korea have cost net 4 million U.S. jobs. That means there's been increases because of exports in jobs, but much larger decreases because of imports. And I can't emphasize enough that when you hear about exports, make sure they talk about the other side of the part, which is the imports. So I have a nice little, it's like telling you that the Buffaloes, when they played USC, scored 28 points. Hey, that's pretty good. But they didn't tell you that USC scored, 56 points. I mean, that's like our trade. That's like our trade.
Great result.
That's like our trade, where we're 500 billion deficit. So let's take a look quick at Korea. Korea wasn't back in NAFTA days of 20 years ago. Korea was effective March 15th. We were promised by the president $10 to $11 billion increase in exports. We were promised the additional 70,000 jobs will be created. Well, 3 years after, what's going on? Our exports have increased by 1.8%, 0.8 billion. Okay, that's not 10 million, it's not 11 billion, but it's not. But our imports have increased by 22.5% to 12.6 billion. Our trade deficit has increased by 80.4%, or 11.8 billion. And jobs, instead of gaining 70,000 jobs, we've lost net 75,000 jobs. And this was negotiated, implemented under President Obama. There's a problem here. We've heard lots of promises for all these trade agreements. Sunny days are here again, right? Or will be. NAFTA, we were promised hundreds of thousands of jobs. We lost 700,000. China, we were promised more jobs. We lost 3.2 million. Korea, we were promised 70,000. We've lost 75,000. As I mentioned before, auto industry, textile industry, commissioned studies to see what the impact of TPP would be on their sectors only. More than 600,000 jobs lost is their projection. Again, that other study, wages. 90% of workers will suffer from a wage cut due to TPP. This is not good. It's no longer any good to have promises, empty promises, that aren't built empirically on what we know, what we have experienced. There's no irony that the labor movement got together, and something I don't remember, the entire labor movement, 20 million people, signed a letter saying they oppose fast track. Environmental groups, 44 major environmental groups, signed letters opposing this. Faith groups, 250 economists opposing the impact of TPP and those kind of deals on capital controls. The ability of countries to regulate the flows of capital. And it's in the new investment chapter. There are loopholes. There are problems with that. Okay. In terms of small business, it's important for exports and things like that, but in reality, 4% of Colorado's small businesses depend on exports. Doesn't mean that 4% isn't important, but there's 96% that don't. And the overall economy and overall demand is absolutely necessary for small business and general business. That we have a strong middle class instead of being attacked by trade agreements and offshoring of jobs and investment. We need investment here, we need jobs here, and it's not to say that other countries, we want to have improved labor rights and human rights in other countries. We want that. We want to secure that. We're especially a union. We're involved with global unions. And we've been promised repeatedly in trade agreements, starting with NAFTA, where we had side agreements, then it goes to CAFTA, we had labor chapter, where it goes to Colombia, where you had a labor action plan, and they are totally inadequate because they're not enforced. Guatemala unions and the AFL-CIO brought complaints against Guatemala in 2008. It was picked up by the USTR in 2009. Took them till 2014 to actually continue with it. It doesn't work the way it's set up. And the same thing with small businesses. The share of small businesses in exports has decreased. So let's get that focused, and we need a new approach to globalization. It's happening. Who's going to set the rules and who's going to benefit? Is it going to promote the general welfare? And the way it's structured, who's setting the rules are the multinational corporations using small business as a cover. Though, what you mentioned about blocks to small businesses and the craziness of the rules in different countries, it's a problem, should be worked through. But that's not to say who the main motor is here. And we have to understand that. And we have to have a trade policy that works for all of us, not just some of us. China, Japan are major currency manipulators. That means they use their pension funds, their sovereign funds to purchase dollars to depreciate their currency relative to ours. So in the last 18 months, Japan's currency has been devalued by 35%. Now, what's that mean? That means that Japanese goods automatically get a 35% discount when they come to the United States just because of the currency change, the ratio of exchange. U.S. products get a 35% penalty. So all the talk about tariffs is undone and overwhelmed by this currency manipulation. It's no wonder we have a $67 billion trade deficit with Japan. A majority by both parties have written letters, majorities in the Senate and the House, that currency manipulation should be a part of the trade agreements. Well, they're not. And that is a big problem because it costs us around 5.8 million jobs just in currency manipulation. All right. So, closing. What is going on here? Let's not continue the same thing over and over again. We've had enough. Environmental groups, American Sustainable Business Council, 200,000 businesses, 129 law professors, 550 organizations, United Labor, representing 20 million, prescription drugs, ARP Consumers Union, Rally and Doctors Without Borders, Interfaith, 43 interfaith groups, 257 economists, 140 state legislators, and on and on. People, when they learn more about this, get more and more upset. And it's a problem. But that's an opportunity for us. Let's defeat this fast track. Let's defeat these trade deals that don't serve our interests and don't promote the general welfare. And let's create another set of rules that raise the standards for people, that improves the quality of life, and not as a race to the bottom. We want a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. We need a different set of rules. We need more democracy in this thing. Let's change it. It's not working. Don't keep doing it.